he did, as you said, rewrite his speech. I don't think you can go through what he went through on Saturday, really a near-death experience, and not come out on the other side impacted. And he, I think, truly was impacted, and I think you will hear that in his speech tonight.
Welcome back to America Decides. As you just heard, former President Donald Trump has told his family and those around him he's significantly rewritten his speech for tonight, accepting the Republican Party's nomination, which I mentioned at the top. We shouldn't overlook this, for a historic 3 consecutive times, first time ever in party's history. I want to be joined here, proud to be joined, by our campaign reporter, Jake Rosen. Jake, you spend a lot of time at Trump rallies. You know the standard former President Trump campaign speech very well, possibly as well as any campaign reporter. What are you expecting that will sound possibly different tonight?
I'm expecting those same through lines on things like immigration, on the economy, but I think the attacks that we've seen on Joe Biden may be mellowed. But at the same time, you know, he's dealing with COVID right now. Does he wish him well and then attack him? Does he not bring him up at all? I don't think you can do that. Does he just go after Harris, or does he just group Democrats together? Or does he not mention all, right? Like the talking about unity and the softer side of Trump, we saw it last night with Donald Trump Jr.'s child talking about the soft side of the grandfather. They already rolled this out kind of last night. I think tonight it's what side of Trump does he go to show the American people, and what does he talk and tell us about the assassination attempt that we don't know so much of from the time he went in the motorcade to the time he stepped off the airplane in Newark?
And would you surprise you, Jake, if there was something in that description of what happened Saturday that would land in a completely unusual Trump column, which would be or sound vulnerable?
You know, I think the way that I've spoken to the campaign, they are vulnerable now. Their staffers who were there have, and this feeling of shock that I think as someone who was there, we all feel. Does he display that tonight, or does he put on the fight, throwing the fist pump up to a raucous crowd reaction when they saw him get lifted up off of the floor in Butler? I think there are 2 versions of Donald Trump. Which one do we see tonight? The fighter that they've consistently shown us since Saturday, that he is a fighter, or do they scale it back just enough so that Americans can get a view that no one really has gotten yet outside of the immediate family and close Trump circle? Very
quickly, I want the audience to understand, you've never before seen former President Trump or his campaign lean into the grandfather, the kindly grandfather motif. That is brand new here.
Absolutely. And when the campaign staff and the people around Donald Trump tell me about him, they bring that up, but they don't always say it on the air.
Never.
And they don't always tell you in a statement when you're asking for a reaction to a political event. Usually it's written with that bravado of Trump that we are so used to. And I think these days, and especially last night, I thought Donald Trump Jr.'s daughter was just the perfect example for them to roll out before tonight, so that, you know, this is the man who prints out the honor roll of his granddaughter and shows it to friends. This is not the man who's yelling at people, as has been reported by you and others for 9-10 years now, the angry man behind the scenes that Democrats have targeted and some Republicans have come out against for being unfit for office.
Jake Rosen, proud to be with you. Thanks for your help. Ed O'Keefe joins us now. Ed, your thoughts about tonight and its potential impact on this campaign led by what the former President Trump tells the country?
Well, you know, we've heard from his family the last few days that we should anticipate a softer, more unifying candidate to appear on stage tonight. We've heard this before. Now, in fairness, we haven't had a candidate grazed by a bullet appear just a few days later to accept the nomination and perhaps demonstrate that he's a different man now. But I can recall in the past we've been told, oh, he's, you know, trying to tone it down, or he's changing his focus, or he's, you know, trying to be more of a human candidate and less of this sort of, you know, New York power broker or somebody who's a little more aggressive. So let's just see what that looks like tonight, what themes he tries to strike, and then let's see if it continues tomorrow and beyond. And if that really does start to happen, and he can garner national sympathy, not only from his own party, but maybe those that were on the fence about it, or who are looking for a reason to vote for him in the wake of the assassination attempt, then he's off to the races, and he'll continue pulling away, as our CBS News poll tonight suggests he could. But the other thing to keep in mind as we look at this dynamic, there are a lot of Democrats watching tonight who would like to see the current president step out of the race, who believe that a somewhat chaotic, uncharted territory kind of situation in the next few weeks leading into their convention could potentially snatch a lot of the interest and color and enthusiasm and intrigue and news coverage, frankly, away from Republicans and maybe rejuvenate and revive American interest in the campaign in a way that hasn't existed now for the last 18 months, as people have consistently told us they're no fan of either option that they have right now.
Ed, you've been on the floor every night of this convention. Please let our audience know what you've been hearing on the floor from the delegates, their level of enthusiasm, their level of emotional attachment to this candidate, which they came here liking and admiring. I imagine, based on my conversations, I haven't had as many as you have, that has been, if anything, doubled, maybe even more.
Well, there was a lot of a resolve and emotional concern for him until he emerged Monday night. And ever since, I get a vibe of like, we've got this, right? Like if we can just keep this going, bottle it up and take it home with us, we may be on the verge of a big win. A quiet confidence maybe. But a lot of the people who attend this, I think it's important for people to remember, they are not the people you see at Trump rallies. They are professional party operative types who have been around a while. I've been struck by the age of these people and how many tell me this is my 5th convention. I've been to 12 of these. I've been coming since 1996 in San Diego. And only now are you beginning to see Trump era and Trump-loving activists and operatives end up in these seats in ways that they maybe weren't there in 2016 and probably will be now in the years to come. And so, yeah, they're interested. They're excited about tonight. They want to see what kind of message he delivers. And I get a sense that there's a real hope that he will strike a unifying, somewhat emotional message because they know that that's a big barrier for entry to many of their friends and neighbors and colleagues back home who say, look, I'd love to have all these things he wants to do, but he's a mean guy. He's got all these other legal problems. I just can't do it. Maybe something tonight gives him a reason to think I can do it. We'll see.
Maybe indeed. Ed O'Keefe, as always, thank you so very much.